everyone, welcome back to another Hello Bluebird collaboration with my friend Jen over at Katahdin Krafts. I will have a link to her video in the description box below, so when you're finished watching here, please head on over to her channel and show her some love. Here's a look at some of the products that I'm using. I have the Banner Buddies stamp set. This is probably one of the first stamp sets that I ever purchased from Hello Bluebird. I'll be using some of the critters and of course the floral bouquet. I have the Banner Blessings, and I'll use the sentiment that says grateful for you always. I've never used this. I have the oak tree scene. This has been in my stash for quite some time, so it was time to pull that out. And then I'll be using some Hero Arts white embossing powder. I have die cut the oak tree scene, and I'm adding the tree portion to my sticky mat. This just helps me to ink blend without all of these pieces moving around and me getting fingerprints on them, because there are a few really tiny pieces. I started my blending with some peeled paint, and then I'm going to add some mowed lawn all around the edges. Once I finish with this, I'll bring in my grass and we'll start blending that out. I went for a spring scene. As most of you are like me, I'm sure you're ready for winter to be over and ready to get into some of the more milder weather. So I thought that I would inspire you with a spring scene today. I started by adding some of that mowed lawn to the grass area, what was left on my brush, and then I went around the edges with my Lucky Clover. Of course, this is Distress Oxide, so I did want to oxidize the ink. I added a lot of water using my Distress sprayer into the palm of my hands and clapped over the top of this. I wanted to add some more splatters, so I smooshed some of that Lucky Clover onto my glass mat. I wet my watercolor brush, and then I, of course, added those splatters. I have an A2 size top folding card base here. I'm going to start this out by inking directly to the panel. I'm going to make a little bit of a mistake here. I had placed my scene over the top of this, and so I'm going to go very heavy over on this right hand side because that's the area that's going to be most exposed. That left side's going to be covered up by the tree. So I blended out one of my new favorite sky combinations, which is going to be the Prized Ribbon Salvage Patina, and then of course the Broken China. I'm going to do some very heavy splattering. I prefer the clapping, I think, rather than the slight depress to the Distress Oxide water gun, but you know, it is what it is. Anyway, this ends up being a little bit more warped because I got some of those really heavy droplets. So I end up taking the top folding card base, and I am going to cut the top section off. But as you saw, I did use some, I believe I used Vintage Photo maybe on the tree. And so I did the same ink blending over that, and then I added the water splatters to the top of that. So here is the card panel. It's no longer a card base because of the warping from those heavy drips. I'm adding the frame that cuts out when you cut out the oak tree scene. It does cut out a nice little frame, so I'm adding that to the outside. But what I didn't do right here, you're going to see, is I didn't turn my panel back around. So the portion on the right side is where the tree was going to go if you would have turned this around. And instead, I'm going to get a little bit of a bare spot on my card. It's slightly noticeable, but I was really bummed when I put everything down and I realized that I didn't turn this panel around the correct way. When I had inked it using the top folding card base, there was no way I would have messed that up because, of course, the top of the card where it flips open, it would have been on the right, that inking would have been on the right hand side. But because I did trim out that panel and I'm going to adhere it to another card base, I just got all mixed up, didn't even think about what I was doing, got into the groove and started adding my pieces. You can see that I am adding foam tape to the grass, to the tree, and then finally I'll also be adding some foam tape to the top to each of those little images for the treetop. And I really love the vibrancy of the colors on this card. I'm so ready for strong colors. After, I love each season. I'm going to preface this by saying that I love Christmas. I love Valentine's Day. But as you know, we get bored as crafters and we want to move on. And I am so ready to move on to vibrant colors. So creating this scene using these really nice, strong primary colors really made my heart very happy. I'm going to do some no-line Copic coloring here. I did stamp my images out onto Copic friendly paper using antique linen distress ink. That helps with the no-line coloring. So when I start adding my ink, as you can see here, I'm using some C markers. I believe I had a C2 and a C0, so maybe a C4, C2, C0. When I started adding my colors to the bird, it picks up the darkest color on the outline of the bird, so you will get the outline, but of course, because I'm using a gray marker, it will turn that ink gray, which is something that I really like. I thought I would go with a little red breast. I know that most of the time when I see birds from Hello Bluebird, typically they're bluebirds, and I thought I would do something just a little bit different, so I went with the gray tones on the bird and of course the red breast. Here I'm going to color up that bouquet. If you're interested in the colors that I used, I will try to link them in the description box below. I believe that I did write them down, so I do have them available. I'm using, I believe, some YG markers. I think I have a YG5 and a YG7 for the leaves on this. I colored up my daffodils, my flowers, I should say, using some yellow tones, and I'm going to show you exactly how I colored them. So I laid my lightest color down and I went over all of the florals just like this, and then I'm going to add a darker marker and I'm going to separate those petals. So right here you can see that where there's a dip around the outside edge of each of those flowers, I'm just going to draw in a petal using that definition, that dip, to help show me where those petals would separate at. I'm going to add some green to the center of each of those, and then we're going to color our bunny in a white combination. So I'm going to use some light gray markers, and I'm going to add that coloring just around the outside where the shadows would be, where the legs bend, underneath the arms. That'll give me a faux white finish. Of course, I always like to add cheeks to my images, so I did take an R30 marker and I'm going to blend that out just a little bit. Add some black for the eyes with my micron pen. Some more pink to the nose. I'm going to blend this out just a little bit more, and then I will take it over to my brother's Scan and Cut, and I am going to cut out all of the images. Of course, I do like to add highlights to everything, so I do use my white gel pen to add some dotting, a few lines here and there. I think it really makes the images pop. I started with the dots on the squirrel, and then I thought that I just didn't like it as much, so I went and I just closed off those lines. Nice and easy peasy. I'm going to add some accents to the birds, and then I'll take it over to my Scan and Cut, and I'm going to cut out all of the images. Because the grass and the tree is popped up, I'm going to need to add some foam tape to some of the animals, just parts of them. But first I'm going to do my embossing for my sentiment. I did use my anti-static tool, and then I used some Versamark ink with the stamp that says grateful for you. I covered it with some white embossing powder, and then I heat set it with my heat tool. There's where I add this card panel to my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card base. I'm going to add my flowers first. I start with 3 over here on the left hand side, and And then I decide later on that I wanted to add all 5 of them. I thought maybe I might scatter them around the scene, but I ended up deciding to just add them in a bunch to the left side. Typically when I would see people planting their bulbs, a lot of times they plant them in clusters, and so I just thought that I would add the cluster under my tree. Getting back to the foam tape, so I don't need foam tape at the bottom of the rabbit, but I do need it at the top of the head because that sky is dipped down. I'm going to add a little bit of foam to this bird, but this one I can glue directly down because that is going onto a fully foamed or lifted surface. And then here's where I'm adding those final flowers, and that will finish off my card for today. I'll show you a close-up of my finished card. Again, I would love for you to head over to Jen's channel and show her some love. If you're new to my channel, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to watch this video today. If you liked what you saw, please make sure that you give it a thumbs up and make sure that you subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.